The United Nations' ability to effectively carry out its missions has been constrained in recent years. Namely, not all of its veto-wielding members of the Security Council saw eye to eye in ways of resolving major conflicts, from civil wars to invasions. But the conversation is not just limited to the United Nations. In fact, multilateralism, from the World Trade Organization to the International Criminal Court, face similar limitations in maintaining international order and peace. For further insights, we're now joined by Professor Kim Byung-joo of the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
Before we jump into today's topic, because there was such a major headline, we want to ask your thoughts on it. We saw reports of the most brazen attack in Israeli and Palestinian history, the broadest invasion in Israel in 5 decades. What do you make of the Hamas attack and Israel's retaliation?
Yeah, this is supposedly, perhaps, arguably one of the saddest part of human history of the modern world, indeed. The way I see it and the way a lot of people see it, beginning of 20th century, in that part of the world, those people who left the land thousands of years ago, I guess that was a 6th century BC, these Jewish people who left the land at that time came back after all this suffering, that we know, including the genocide, terrible, terrible things happening in Europe, and the way they lived their lives as second-rate citizen in diaspora for thousands of years. They came back and they claimed the land. And since then, these Palestinians who had lived there, even together with Jewish people before their departure, they were driven to 2 corners, Gaza district and then West Bank, and Palestinians have lived in terrible life. Living conditions there were terrible. And we know throughout that time there have been several continuous rounds of military confrontation. And this sad history, dating back all the way from the sad history of Jewish people and then sad history of the Palestinian people there. It's just repeating the violence again and again, and killing people is never justified and should never be accepted as a means of proper struggle. But at the same time, also, oppressing people, forcing people living in terrible living conditions, depriving their future, and so on. That's also a terrible thing to do as well. So this is circle of violence itself is just breaks our heart. Those of us who understand the history and mindful of the history, and at the same time, it saddens us further, realizing there is no immediate solution despite all these several decades of efforts by the world to resolve situations. So it just saddens us more and more when we see this circle of violence.
I'm not quite sure if it's a stretch to tie it into today's discussion topic too, Professor Kim Byung-joo, because the idea of multilateralism is in order for us to sustain a more peaceful, or just the idea of maintaining international order, isn't that sort of the basis of creating organizations like the United Nations, the WTO, or even the International Criminal Court? And the big question at hand, and we've mentioned it in passing in this segment too, is its authority deteriorating as we speak? So maybe we can jump into a discussion we've had before too, the war in Ukraine. We know what Russia has done in Ukraine and what sort of military partnership it envisions with North Korea. Can you first explain the argument that Russia, as a consequence of their choices, has undermined its own position as a permanent member of the UN Security Council?
All right. First of all, their invasion of Ukraine itself, seriously undermines their position as a permanent member of UN Security Council that's designed to preserve peace. So that's a critical blow. But relating to Ukraine now, because they need help, they have reached out North Korea. Now that action really causes a real trouble for Russia, because right at this point, North Korea, as an aspirant nuclear power, their efforts to develop nuclear weapons have been faced with UN sanctions. It's the international community trying to discourage North Korea from doing what they're trying to do. And the North Korea is facing sanctions as a result of nuclear weapons development efforts. And these sanctions all come from the United Nations. And the United Nations, when they come up with these sanctions, rounds of sanctions, they were driven by the United Nations Security Council. And Security Council is led by the five permanent members, where Russia has a seat.
Mm.
So therefore, Russia making deals with North Korea itself undermines Russia's own position as a critical member of a world community that has been trying to do these things in order to preserve peace in this world community. So that's why they're saying it's like shooting themselves on the foot.
Mm. It would also be in the Western interest to strengthen the UN's influence to serve its founding purpose. Again, maintain peace, maintain international order. Explain and could you evaluate Biden's argument that the UN needs to add new permanent Security Council members?
It has to do with the fact that Russia itself is acting this way to undermine its own, position and also undermine the effectiveness of the United Nations
Right,
Security
right.
Council. And also, United States is painfully mindful of China's rising position and its
Mm.
challenge against the United States. So actually, even before China's rise, United States has been actually arguing for increase of number of permanent members of the UN Security Council. For decades, they've been talking about adding Japan and Germany.
Mm.
Japan and Germany actually are the ones that have contributed a lot financially for international organizations, United Nations, not only that, but World Bank and IMF and so on. So
Mm.
the idea of interest of the United States trying to do this is very clear because Japan and Germany, these countries are United States friends. So if you add more seats for your friends, of course your power increases. It's just totally obvious, and they're not really friends with China or Russia. So that's a clear, obvious calculation on the side of the United States. But the thing is, it's extremely difficult, almost nearly impossible for China and Russia agreeing to that point, knowing what's in the minds of the United States. So, this argument can be made, but the way it could be executed, nobody really knows how it will be at all possible. And for decades, as the United States has been working on this idea, even the United States allies sitting in the permanent seat, like UK and France and so on, they didn't speak out, but they themselves don't want to have their number of seats increase because you're a fixed pie and you're currently it's divided by five, and then now if you have to divide it by seven or eight, your share of pie decreases basically. So
Mm.
even UK and France have not been supporting the idea, even though they didn't speak out for decades. But so that even adds further to the complicated dynamics here. So plausibility, great doubt about it.
The intention we clearly understand. Plausibility, that might be a different question, out of
Right.
reach.
Mhm.
An international organization that seems to face even bigger troubles than the United Nations may be the WTO. Could you explain the situation there and what that implies?
WTO is an international organization, as our listeners well know, to liberalize world trade, make it free, and keep it free. For that, WTO has two functions. One is promoting free trade by eliminating trade barriers continuously on one side, trade promotion or trade liberalization on one hand. And the other one is trade dispute settlement.
Yeah.
When the countries do not agree on what the other country is doing, WTO make a rule deciding which country is right on this dispute. The thing is, on the promotion side, trade liberalization side, I was in Doha when Doha round
Mm.
was launched 2001.
Mm.
And since then, what? That's the year my youngest daughter was born, but now she's about to graduate her college.
A lot of
And
time has
nothing has
passed.
happened. More than a long time, right? This newborn baby is now adult, and the thing is, nothing has happened on that side because of the opposition from the developing countryside and
Mm.
disagreement with the developed world side. So, trade promotion liberalization, nothing happened. It's paralyzed for the last about more than 20 years. Dispute settlement, that was a real strength of WTO for years. But the thing is, countries like the United States didn't like what this dispute settlement body was doing, making judgments on, what it is that the United States has not been doing. The United States has been losing their cases a lot.
Mm,
And Trump came in and he said, "We don't like WTO. We want to leave
mm,
WTO." He was threatening to leave WTO, and he began uh, refusing to approve judges sitting in the dispute settlement
mm,
body. There are seven-member judges. They have 4-year term, renewable term, and after 4 years or after 8 years of renewed term, they have to leave.
mm,
And the United States has have refused to approve appointment of judges. So one by one, seven judges, they all left after their term.
mm.
They have no judges sitting on the panel.
Oh,
So that dispute settlement side is also paralyzed since 2015, 16. I think last time the judge left was about 2016. We had Korean judge sitting there, Jang Seung-hwa,
right.
professor at Seoul National University. He left, and after that, there's another Chinese judge who was the last one. And then he left. And then since then, it's not functioning. So WTO is paralyzed, basically. That's a simple way of describing what's happening with WTO since 2015. And then Biden has not done anything about it to revive WTO. So WTO is facing a terrible condition.
And I'm wondering, because the United States has an important election coming up next year, if Donald Trump does return to the White House, does that jeopardize the WTO's fate even more, or will it just remain the status quo? And in a larger context, do the fate of these number of international organizations really hang in the balance? How would
Yeah.
Trump's return change the future of the UN and the WTO?
Right. Trump's return has implications for so many different things around the world, including the national security of South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and so on. But on the side, also international organizations, this system that has sustained modern life ever since the post World War II world,
Mm,
they face great challenge. As I mentioned, Trump is the one who first, who threatened to leave WTO. United States is a founder of WTO basically, and so how it's going to go. One clear principle about Trump policy is that there's no principle. So you don't know how it's going to go. Maybe one possible principle is he's going to go with the what his supporters want, basically, and how that
mm,
changes and everything. Nobody's sure about it, but we know he threatened to leave. He threatened to take United States out of WTO. That's one thing for the future of WTO. And within UN, he has been giving speeches every year when UN General Assembly was being held. So he does not have leaving UN in his mind altogether, I don't think. But the
mm,
thing is, one of the important things that UN has been doing, the UNFCCC, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Cooperation, the what world community is trying to do, trying to slow down the climate change and everything.
mm,
Uh, United States began process of leaving this process, leaving it behind, getting out of it
mm,
during Trump administration.
mm,
So that's one of the biggest threats for climate change cooperation. And
mm.
so whether there will be revived or not, that's another big question a lot of people have in mind at this point, whose answer nobody has.
Dr. Kim, at the UN, Korea is going to serve as its Security Council member next year. What difference can Korea make in that capacity, in that seat?
This is not the first time Korea has been serving as the Security Council
Mm,
member country. There's, as I said, a permanent member, five of them. They're there forever. United States, UK, France, Russia, and China. But there are also 10 non-permanent member countries that
mm,
alternates every 2 years.
mm,
And Korea is now going to be serving there 2024, 2025.
mm,
This is third time Korea has been doing this. Back in 1996, 97, Korea served once, and then 2013 and 14, Korea served second time, and this is the third time, which makes Korea one of the most active member of the United Nations. We have to know that. I mean, we have to be reminded we have produced UN Secretary General back in 2001, who renewed his service 2006, and so two-term United Secretary General, and then three-term United Nations Security Council membership. Korea is one of the most active member of the United Nations. So that this is a great news, and this further strengthens Korea's position as a whole. This time, the third time serving at the United Nations Security Council, Korea enjoys this very interesting and perhaps possibly advantageous situation. That is, from next year in the National Security Council of the United Nations, the Security Council of the United Nations, there will be United States, Japan, and Korea sitting together. Three countries sitting together there. And so because this trilateral cooperation is very important in this world, having three countries sitting together at the United Nations Security Council will make a lot of differences in terms of countering North Korea, and also doing what we can in terms of dealing with Russia's this erratic behavior and so on. And so it will give us interesting and unusual advantage in a way. So that's what we are looking forward to, being mindful of Korea's status as one of the most active member of the United Nations community, if you will.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for today's insights. Happy Hunger Day to you. We'll speak to you again next week.
Same to you. Thank you very much.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.